On the night of February 1st, 1959, something happened on a remote mountain slope in the northern Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. 9 experienced hikers, students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, ripped open their tent from the inside and ran barefoot into -30-degree darkness. They never came back. When search teams found the tent 26 days later, it was half collapsed and covered in snow. The hikers' boots, coats, and supplies were still inside. Whatever made them run, they didn't stop to take anything. Some were found frozen in the snow. Others were found months later, buried under 12 feet of snow in a ravine, with injuries that made no sense. Crushed ribs, a missing tongue, radioactive clothing. The Soviet investigation gave one conclusion: death caused by a compelling natural force. Then they sealed the case files for decades. This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an engineering student and experienced mountaineer at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, now called Yekaterinburg. He'd organized the trip as a Category 3 expedition, the most difficult classification in the Soviet hiking system. The goal: reach Otorten, a peak roughly 6 miles north of where they would die. There were 10 members originally, 9 men and women in their early 20s, plus their 37-year-old sports instructor, Semyon Zolotaryov. One member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to knee and back pain. He would be the only survivor. These weren't amateurs. Several had extensive backcountry experience. They carried proper equipment. They had food, a stove, skis, and warm clothing. By all accounts, this was a routine expedition for people of their skill level. On January 28th, they set out from the settlement of Vizhai, heading into the wilderness of the northern Urals. Over the next 4 days, they skied north along the Ospaya River and began climbing toward the pass between Kholat Syakhl and Otorten. The name Kholat Syakhl translates from the indigenous Mansi language as Dead Mountain. On February 1st, they pitched their tent on the exposed slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was the last thing they ever did. When the group didn't return by February 12th, their expected arrival date, no one panicked immediately. Delays were common in winter expeditions, but by February 20th, families and the university pressed for a search. Volunteer teams, fellow students, and hikers set out first. Then, the military joined with planes and helicopters. On February 26th, searchers found the tent. It was on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, roughly a mile from the tree line below. The tent was partially collapsed, weighed down by snow, but the most chilling detail was the cuts. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, not unzipped, cut through the canvas with a knife from within, multiple slashes. They had carved their way out. Outside, searchers found footprints in the snow, 8 or 9 sets, heading downhill toward the tree line. Some prints were from bare feet, some from a single sock. In -30-degree temperatures, the footprints walked in a calm, orderly line. They did not run. Then, about 1.5 miles downhill at the edge of the forest, searchers found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko were found at the base of a large cedar tree near the remnants of a small fire. They were dressed in underwear. Their hands were torn and bloodied. Branches on the cedar were broken up to 15 feet high. They had climbed the tree desperately, probably looking back toward the tent or trying to see what was coming. The fire had burned for no more than an hour. Then it went out, or they stopped feeding it. 300 yards uphill from the cedar, searchers found the next 3 bodies: Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. They were found at intervals between the cedar and the tent, as if they'd been trying to walk back uphill. All 3 were frozen. Slobodin had a fracture in his skull, a hairline crack, not enough to be immediately fatal, but suspicious. All 5 of these hikers died of hypothermia. The official cause of death was exposure to cold, but these were only 5. 4 members of the group were still missing. It took 3 more months. In May 1959, as snow began to melt, searchers found the remaining 4 bodies in a ravine about 250 feet from the cedar tree, buried under 12 feet of snow. This is where the case becomes something else entirely. Lyudmila Dubinina was found with massive chest trauma. Her ribs were broken inward with a force the medical examiner compared to a car crash. She was also missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips. The soft tissue had been removed, though some investigators later attributed this to decomposition and scavenging. Alexander Kolovatov lay nearby with his neck apparently deformed. Nikolai Thibault Brignol had a major skull fracture, depressed, as if struck by an enormous blunt force, and Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest member, had the same devastating chest injuries as Dubinina. Ribs crushed inward, broken by force that didn't break the skin. No external wounds, no signs of a fight. Whatever crushed them did so with massive, focused pressure, but left no bruises on the surface. Some of their clothing tested positive for radioactive contamination. Not extreme levels, but present and unexplained. The Soviet investigators had no precedent for this. 9 bodies, no attacker, no avalanche debris. Injuries inconsistent with any animal or human assault, and a tent that had been calmly, deliberately cut open from the inside. In the decades since, the Dyatlov Pass Incident has generated dozens of theories, each one explaining part of the evidence, but none explaining all of it. The avalanche theory is the most commonly cited. In 2021, researchers published a study arguing that a small slab avalanche, delayed by specific snow conditions, could have collapsed onto the tent, causing the chest injuries. The hikers then cut their way out and fled downhill. But critics note there was no avalanche debris found at the tent site. The slope angle was too gentle, and the footprints outside were orderly, not panicked. Some have proposed a military connection. The Soviet military was testing parachute mines and rockets in the region. Bright orbs were reported in the sky that night by other groups 50 miles away. Could a weapons test have gone wrong, causing a blast wave or toxic exposure? That could explain the radioactive clothing. But no blast crater was found. The infrasound theory suggests that wind passing over the mountain created a low-frequency sound wave below human hearing that can cause panic, disorientation, and irrational behavior. This could explain why they fled the tent, but it doesn't explain the crushing injuries. And then there are the fringe theories, UFOs, secret government experiments, none supported by evidence, but the case is so strange that no theory can be entirely dismissed. In 2019, 60 years after the incident, the Russian government officially reopened the case. Prosecutor Andrei Kuryakov announced that the investigation would consider only 3 natural explanations: avalanche, snow slab, or hurricane-force winds. In July 2020, Kuryakov announced the conclusion: an avalanche. A small slab avalanche hit the tent, he said, injuring some members. The group cut their way out, walked downhill to seek shelter, and died of hypothermia and their injuries. Families of the victims rejected the conclusion. Independent researchers called it incomplete. The 2021 academic study supported parts of the theory, showing that a delayed slab avalanche was physically possible given the specific terrain conditions, but acknowledged it couldn't account for everything. The Dyatlov Foundation, established by the families, continues to push for a more thorough investigation. Key pieces of evidence, the original tent, the clothing, the medical samples, have been lost or destroyed over the decades. In 2019, the remains of the hiker's tent were found in a museum storeroom, misidentified and forgotten for years. Critical physical evidence had been mishandled from the very beginning. 9 people walked into the mountains in February 1959. Whatever happened on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain, happened fast enough that they didn't put on their boots, and violent enough that it crushed ribs without breaking skin. The Soviet Union sealed the case. Russia reopened it, then closed it again with an answer that satisfies almost no one. Key evidence is gone. Every few years, a new theory surfaces, a new simulation, a new academic paper, and every time, the same problem remains. No single explanation accounts for all the evidence. The pass between Kholat Syakhl and Otorten was officially renamed Dyatlov Pass in 1963 in memory of the group. A memorial plaque stands at the site. Hikers still visit. The mountain keeps its secret.